Have you ever wondered why some women choose silence over small talk, their own bed over shared sheets, their solitude over the clamor of conditional love? In a world addicted to validation, there exists a different kind of woman. The woman who lives alone, not by accident, not by circumstance, but by sovereign choice. She is not alone because she cannot have a man. Make no mistake, she has been adored, pursued, whispered about in dark corners of the masculine psyche. But the currency of attention, the shallow weight of words, the fragile promises of men who have not yet confronted their own shadows, none of these can anchor her. Carl Jung spoke often of the anima, the unconscious feminine within man, elusive, maddening, radiant in how men project their unlived dreams onto women, carving her into an archetype of salvation, of softness, of surrender. But the woman who lives alone has shattered that mirror. She refuses to carry the projections of incomplete men upon her skin. She does not exist to heal what they refuse to face. You've seen her before. In the quiet cafe corner with a book, the color of storm clouds, in the flickering candlelight of an art gallery where no one holds her hand, on rain-slick streets at midnight, unafraid of her own shadow. She is both the question and the answer men fear. They call her mysterious, detached, dangerous. But beneath those labels lies a deeper truth. She is free and freedom. For the woman untethered from the expectations of partnership is not mere rebellion. It is rebirth. She has walked through the burning house of societal approval, through the charred remnants of past betrayals, and emerged sovereign, clothed not in desperation, but in discernment. The woman who lives alone has learned that solitude is not emptiness, it is an altar. It is the temple where she confronts her wounds, where she stitches together the tattered fabric of her own worth, away from the clamor of those who only love what they can possess. Most women are taught to fear loneliness as failure. Fairy tales, warn of spinsters, abandoned, bitter, forgotten. Yet Carl Jung would tell you individuation, the awakening of the authentic self, demands exile. It requires walking away from comfort, from false reflections, from the echo chambers of shallow relationships, into the wilderness of one's own mind. This woman knows the wilderness well. She has made peace with the dark rooms of her psyche, with the ghosts of men who wanted her compliant, with the versions of herself that once chased affection like oxygen. She has buried the fragments of old dependencies beneath marble gravestones etched with the names of every lesson learned in silence. And do you know what happens when a woman buries her need for validation? She becomes magnetic. The man who cannot understand her solitude feels drawn to her like a moth to the flame, because in her absence of need, she embodies the forbiddens. She holds the power of detachment, the allure of the unknown, the scent of mystery that no conquest can contain. Men ache for the woman who lives alone because she is not a mirror for their unworthiness. She reflects only what is whole, what is real, what cannot be manipulated. And that terrifies them. You see, in the male psyche untamed by self-awareness, there lingers a hunger to conquer, to be the reason a woman folds, softens, submits. But this woman has folded only into herself. Her softness is earned, not demanded. Her submission is to no one but her soul. She does not chase. She does not beg. She does not barter her essence for fleeting warmth that the world will tell her she is too much. Too quiet, too discerning, too unwilling to compromise for the illusion of connection. But those judgments slide off her like water on obsidian. She has tasted her own loneliness, sipped it like bitter wine, and found herself intoxicated with resilience. The truth is, some women live alone, not because they are unchosen, but because they refuse to be chosen by the unworthy. There is a sacred violence in her solitude. Not the violence that wounds, but the quiet, sharpened severing from illusions. You see, for centuries, women were tethered to survival through dependence, a husband's name, a father's roof, the approval of society wrapped around their necks like silk turned to rope. But the woman who lives alone has burned the rope, watched the smoke rise, and breathed it in as a hymn of defiance. Carl Jung taught that every psyche is both light and shadow, and most run from their darkness, projecting it onto lovers, losing themselves in the desperate search for completion. But this woman, she became intimate with her shadow. She sat with the unmet wounds, the echoing doubts, the restless hunger for external validation. She held them like dying embers in her palm, not to extinguish, but to understand. She does not need a man to fill the hollow spaces, because she no longer fears them. She has walked barefoot through the raw corridors of her own becoming. Her loneliness does not break her, it crowns her, and yet her presence lingers like forbidden fruit in the male unconscious. She is the unanswered question haunting their dreams. How can a woman exist so whole, so untethered, so radiant, without orbiting the gravitational pull of a man? The fragile male ego still entangled in projection, in conquest, in the ache. For significance cannot fathom it. This woman dismantles the archetype of the dependent, clings to no pedestal, offers no easy surrender. And yet, she possesses an undeniable, almost unbearable allure. Because what is rarer, more intoxicating, than a woman who chooses herself? The men who encounter her feel both threatened and captivated. They are drawn in by her detachment, her quiet refusal to perform emotional acrobatics to secure affection. They speak of her with reverence and resentment, labeling her cold, unavailable, difficult, because she cannot be possessed, only invited. And even then, she chooses Dot in a society that praises female compliance. Her discernment is an act of rebellion. Her solitude is a mirror held to every man who has yet to face his incompleteness. Every man desperate to fill the cracks within himself through another's devotion. She reflects not their fantasies, but their inadequacies. And in doing so, she filters out the unworthy, the insecure, the ones who seek to anchor themselves in her energy without offering an anchor of their own. There is an undeniable mysticism to the woman who lives alone. She has become an enigma, a walking paradox, the embodiment of sacred feminine energy, merged with unyielding masculine sovereignty within herself. She contains the softness of the anima, the fierce autonomy of the animus, balanced, whole, unapologetic. The world whispers that she is lonely. But true loneliness is not measured by the absence of company. It is measured by the presence of disconnection. And what could be lonelier than sharing your bed, your mind, your soul with someone who does not see you, someone who only sees their projections reflecting back? She would rather dine alone, walk alone, sleep alone, then delude herself to be. Half loved by half aware men. And so the woman who lives alone stands as both mystery and mirror. To some, she is an unsettling revelation of what they lack. To others, an invitation to ascend beyond ego, beyond the childish need to conquer, to meet her where she stands whole, sovereign, unbroken. She does not fear her own company, because she has learned it the hardest way, that no man can love her beyond the love she cultivates within herself. There is a dangerous beauty in the woman untouched by dependency. Her steps do not echo with the hollow clatter of pursuit. Her eyes do, not dart in search of approval. She is slow, deliberate, present, as if she walks alongside time itself rather than racing against it. And yet, for all her self-possession, there lingers an ancient ache in the space around her, like incense smoldering in an empty cathedral. She is not immune to longing. No human is. But her longing is refined, no longer feral, no longer desperate. It is the longing of one who has tasted herself completely and knows that connection must arrive clothed in reverence. Or not at all. Carl Jung wrote that the man projects his anima, the unconscious ideal of woman, onto the women he encounters. And when she refuses to embody his fantasy, when she lives for herself, he spirals into disillusionment. And this woman, this sovereign creature walking alone through crowded streets, dismantles his illusions with every step. She is no mirror for unformed desire. She is the architect of her own temple. Her solitude is not an empty house, but a sanctuary filled with the echoes of lessons learned the brutal way, the betrayal of false promises, the sting of unreciprocated love, the exhaustion of shrinking to be palatable. She has wept on cold kitchen floors, rebuilt herself under moonlight, stitched her soul back together with threads of defiance. And now, her walls hold only the echoes she permits, the poetry of becoming, the silence of peace, the quiet hum of Power UNSHARED. The woman who lives alone has rewritten the narrative. She is not the discarded, nor the rejected, nor the unloved. She is the one who could have stayed, but chose the wilderness over a gilded cage. Men sense this in her presence, the quiet defiance woven into her voice, the unwavering stillness in her body, the gaze that looks but does not yearn. They circle, intrigued, intoxicated, and unsettled. For how can they conquer what does not crave? She embodies the feminine mystique, stripped of need. The softness of her energy remains, but it is laced with iron. Her kindness is not obligation, it is choice. Her tenderness is not currency, it is gift. Her attention is earned, not assumed. And you, listening now, perhaps you feel the same ache. Perhaps you have walked the edge of solitude, trembling at its sharpness, wondering if you too could stand alone whole, unclaimed. The truth is solitude will break you before it remakes you. But on the other side of that fracture, when the mirrors of false validation have shattered, when the scaffolding of shallow love has collapsed, you will find the quiet, unshakable knowing you are enough, and enoughness terrifies. Those who seek to anchor their worth in your insecurity, the woman who lives alone does not float in isolation. She anchors herself to her inner world, the raw, imperfect, magnificent expanse of selfhood untainted by compromise. She is intimate with her fears, her unmet desires, her shadow, and in that intimacy, she has become her own sanctuary. It is not that she needs no one. It is that she will not abandon herself for anyone. And so, to the men who approach with conquest in their eyes, with hollow promises dripping from their tongues, with fragile egos masked as affection, she smiles, but she does not fold. The woman who lives alone has already walked through fire and emerged untouched by smoke. And yet, there remains within her something profoundly dangerous to those who misunderstand her solitude. She is not lonely, but she is rare. And in rarity lies power. For centuries, the world has whispered myths into the ears of women, that to be alone is to be abandoned, to be unmarried is to be incomplete, to crave quiet over companionship is to be broken. But those stories were penned by those who feared the woman untouched by their grasp, the woman who could not be bought with promises or bent by pressure. Carl Jung reminds us that within every human psyche exists both the masculine and the feminine, not as rivals, but as energies longing for balance. And the woman who lives alone has mastered both. Her presence ripples with the softness of the divine feminine, the intuition, the mystery, the flowing river of emotion, but it is tempered, sharpened, guarded by the discipline unwavering, masculine within her. She no longer looks outward to be protected. She is her own shield. She no longer seeks permission to take up space. She expands with quiet authority. And it is precisely this equilibrium that makes her irresistible, yet unreachable to those unprepared to meet her fully. Men who stumble upon her often find themselves suspended between obsession and terror. They cannot comprehend a woman so self-possessed, so fiercely unbothered by their approval, so detached from the currency of being desired. And yet, they ache for her. It is written into the unconscious of the collective masculine to seek completion outside themselves, to chase the anima, the ideal woman projected into form. But she will not house his unfinished shadows. She will not carry the weight of his unlived truths. She will not soften into the mold of his expectations simply because he finds her beautiful. The woman who lives alone embodies an inconvenient truth. That true power comes not from who desires you, but from who you refuse to betray yourself for. In her quiet apartment, with candlelight reflecting against the cold glass of the window, with music lingering in the background of her solitude, she exists, not as half of a whole, but as a sovereign entity. She pours her own wine. She folds her own blankets. She dreams her own dreams. And there, in the sacred stillness of her space, she weaves a life uncompromised by distraction. The world watches her with curiosity wrapped in disdain. They call her guarded, bitter, impossible to please. But these labels are the desperate projections of those who cannot fathom a woman who withholds her energy not out of spite, but out of sacred discernment. She has loved before. Oh, she has bled before. But every fracture became architecture. Every betrayal built her walls higher, her standards sharper, her intuition keener. And so now, when a man approaches, dripping with charm but hollow of substance, she sees through him like glass. And when a man dares to meet her depth with his own, she welcomes him, not with desperation, but with sovereignty. This is the paradox. The woman who lives alone is both fortress and invitation. But only the worthy will ever cross her threshold. And if they do, they will not find a woman starving for love. They will find a woman already full, whose life is so whole, so rich in self-created meaning that love is not rescue, but revolution. And in that revolution, everything changes, not only for her, but for the man courageous enough to approach with his ego unraveled, his projections shattered, his soul stripped of artifice. You see, the woman who lives alone is not simply detached, she is reborn. Through every night she spent staring at the ceiling, questioning her worth in the echo of abandoned promises. Through every morning she brewed her own coffee in silence, learning the taste of her own presence. Through every tearful reckoning with the parts of herself she once tried to outsource to men, she awakened. Carl Jung spoke of individuation, painful, glorious process of becoming whole within oneself. Few walk that road willingly, because it demands the death of illusions. But this woman, she made solitude her crucible. She burned through her need for external permission, and from the ashes she forged sovereignty. And that sovereignty terrifies the weak. She no longer needs to be chosen, because she has chosen herself over and over again. And when a woman chooses herself, she breaks the oldest chains of the patriarchal myth, that her value lies in being desired, that her worth is measured by her reflection in a man's eyes, that her fulfillment is something gifted to her through marriage, not built from within. The woman who lives alone has heard the whispers. She must be difficult. She must be cold. She must be hiding a broken heart. But they are wrong. Her heart is not broken. It is unguarded to herself, and guarded from fools. She is not difficult. She is discerning. She is not cold. She is sovereign. And those who dare to misunderstand her often do so because her power threatens the foundation of their unexamined lives. To them, a woman unattached, unowned, unbothered is a glitch in their programming, an anomaly in their belief system. They crave her, but they cannot possess her because her worth is not a commodity. It is etched into the architecture of her being. It hums beneath her skin when she walks alone at twilight. It glows in her eyes when she reads quietly in crowded rooms. It lingers in her voice when she says, with unwavering calm, "I am enough." And if she allows love to enter her sanctuary, it is not to fill a void, but to amplify an already abundant life. This is the ultimate seduction. The woman who needs nothing commands everything. And men, stripped of their games, their bravado, their need to conquer, find themselves exposed in her presence, forced to confront their own shadows, their own incomplete psyches, because the woman who lives alone does not shrink for comfort. She expands for truth. And you, listening now, perhaps you feel that stirring, that faint electrifying possibility that you too could unravel the conditioning, that you too could choose solitude not as punishment, but as a portal to self-ownership so profound, the world's approval becomes irrelevant. This is not a fairy tale. This is not folklore. This is the chapter of history they hoped you'd never question. The woman who lives alone rewrites everything. The woman who lives alone is the storm they never saw coming. The woman who lives alone is free. The woman who lives alone is you. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase. She chooses.